Trust in politics is broken. So can we get UK politics working again?
That was the last time we were happy. 2012.
I'm Beth Rigby, Sky's political editor. Join me every week with Labour's Jess Phillips and Conservative peer Ruth Davidson for some electoral dysfunction.
This idea of nuance has completely left politics.
Yeah. Together, we'll focus on the policies that could deliver political satisfaction. Follow Electoral Dysfunction wherever you get your podcasts.
We live in an age where 1 in 2 of us will develop cancer, which means there can't be pretty much anyone listening who hasn't had their life touched in some way or another by this most pernicious of illnesses. But it is an inevitability that when a public figure makes their diagnosis known, such as the King or Princess of Wales, there is an even more vocal public discussion of their illness, their treatment, even their prognosis. Well, today, King Charles returned to his public duties, and we probably shouldn't be entirely surprised that he and Camilla chose a cancer treatment centre in London. Indeed, precious few eyebrows were raised even when the monarch's enlarged prostate was discussed in a palace statement using exactly those words. I'm Niall Paterson, and on this edition of The Daily, we will discuss the royal return to work, the ongoing treatment, and the way in which the House of Windsor has coped during one of the more traumatic periods in its history. Joining us today, of course, our royal correspondent, Rhiannon Mills, but also our sister channel, NBC's royal commentator, Daisy McAndrew. Great to see both of you. Rhiannon, you're down at University College Hospital Macmillan Cancer Centre, where, of course, the King and Queen were earlier today. How were they, first and foremost?
We often hear, don't we, that King Charles is a workaholic, and ever since he was diagnosed with cancer, you could say his wings have been clipped. The doctors, of course, being very cautious and saying, look, you can't do any public-facing engagements. So I have no doubt that he would have been delighted that finally today they've given him the green light and said, yes, you can go out and meet slightly larger groups of people. I was a little bit cheeky. I was crouching down underneath my camera and decided to shout at him, ask him how he was doing. It was quite difficult to hear, but also I said it was good to have him back, and I hope he enjoyed the visit. And from people who were inside, it sounds like he was in his element, basically. He really wants to do what he can when it comes to focusing on cancer. Of course, so many families up and down the country are touched by a diagnosis like this.
Daisy, I suppose little surprise then on a day when he is announced as the patron of Cancer Research UK, having this as his first public outing since the diagnosis that he received was made public. Little surprise that this is where they have chosen to go. And you were nodding along there as Rhiannon was saying, look, he was in his element.
I thought he actually looked quite emotional, in a good way, that he was clearly quite touched by the affection that has been coming his way. And yes and no, Neil, to your question of no surprise that he chose a cancer hospital on the day that he was announced as a patron of cancer research, because if you think back to all his predecessors, we were never told when they had cancer. It wasn't very long ago that not only did nobody really disclose they had cancer because it was the big C, it was so frightening, but certainly no senior member or monarch would do that. And so I think the fact that he has been so public about his cancer and has chosen a cancer hospital as his first big public engagement shows that he wants to be different from his predecessors. So this is a man who's wearing his cancer on his sleeve, and I think that really is marking a modernisation of the royal family and is really significant.
I mean, I remember reading that statement from the palace that included the phrase enlarged prostate. I mean, the idea that we would ever see a statement from the palace itself using that phrase really got me.
Oh yeah, unbelievable, isn't it? We had that statement from the palace where it wasn't the simple he's undergoing tests for some undisclosed condition. And all of the prostate cancer charities could not have been more delighted that actually it was encouraging other men to actually come forward and get checked. And so for him, he's just been so encouraged by the fact that being open has made a difference, because we know that he is a man who as heir, now as king, has wanted to engage on big social issues. I'm told that kind of his charity work focuses on the 4 C's: climate, community, culture and the Commonwealth. And now what they're saying is another C is being added in there. He's going to focus on cancer and what he can do to make a difference, to raise awareness. I've been having some quite interesting conversations with people who know him very well, who tell me that throughout his own journey, he's constantly been talking about other people and how do other people cope with having cancer. I genuinely think there is an acknowledgement from him that he is in such a privileged position. And he keeps asking people, look, how do people who are diagnosed with cancer still cope with carrying on with looking after their children or going to work or going on public transport? So for me, it's going to be interesting to see how he navigates kind of talking about the issue of cancer, because we know that he can't become too political about it. But clearly, you talk to people about the postcode lottery of cancer treatment, and it's very much alive.
And I think Rhiannon makes a really good point there about how King Charles is doing things in his own way, and we are seeing a different side of him. That side is very caring, and of course, in the run-up to his coronation, in the run-up to the Queen's death, a lot was being talked about what sort of monarch is he going to be, what sort of royal family is he going to head. Are we going to lose our affection for them because it was all about the Queen? And we're sort of used to Charles, and he's sort of eccentric and a bit perhaps overly emotional and maybe a bit interfering, a bit of a sort of fuddy-duddy. And I think actually yes, all of those things are sort of true, but they all have a flip side. Yes, he is emotional and perhaps oversensitive, but in this instance, when he's talking about people with cancer, that's really very endearing. So whilst I don't want to say that cancer is doing the royal family a lot of good, we are seeing them in a different light, which I do think will be beneficial.
All of which I suppose serves as a useful reminder that Charles is still receiving treatment for his condition, as indeed Rhiannon is the Princess of Wales, about whom, I have to say at this juncture, we know markedly less about.
We do, and you can't not think about the video that she recorded, where I think the undertone of that was, look, I'm being open with you. I'm telling you that I am being treated for cancer, having pre-cancerous cells, and can you leave us alone now? And that came after the kind of clamour of conspiracy theories and all the noise around the manipulated photograph for Mother's Day. That video very much put a stop to that kind of incessant demand online. You have to remember that you've got Prince William to throw into the mix, and for him there is this red line when it comes to family, privacy, their health, and he is not going to give us any more than he needs to.
It really is a horrendous perfect storm for William at the moment. And I think to many people looking in from the outside, they find it very strange that you have two senior royals, two of the four most senior royals, Catherine and the King, both undergoing cancer, but both being so different in their public relations element to it. But actually, if you think about who they are, what stage of their lives they are at, I personally think it's totally understandable. King Charles is a man in a hurry. He is a man who's going to have a shorter reign than pretty much all his predecessors, even if he lives to, a ripe old age like his mother did. And we know that he's a workaholic, as Rhiannon so rightly said. He wants to get on with it. He wants to make a difference. He wants to make his mark. And he's been waiting for a long time to do that. And I think that is one of the reasons why he wants to be open. He doesn't want to go and hide for a few months while he deals with his cancer. Catherine is at a completely different stage of her life. She's a young mother. We know cancer's more serious when you're younger. She clearly needs to concentrate on her recovery and put her health and her children first. She isn't the Queen yet. Plus, William being so protective about their privacy, wanting to give the children as normal an upbringing as they possibly can because he didn't have that, and the resentment towards the press. I think put all of that into the melting pot and you do understand why you have two very different types of relationship with the press and the public.
I suppose then, Rhiannon, I should not be surprised at a moment such as this that a father, a husband, turns to his nearest and dearest at a time when cancer is on the table. And Camilla has been incredibly visible throughout this period, which I suppose is by design as much by necessity.
If you followed them in any great detail, as I have, whether it's been on royal tours or engagements, they are a really close working partnership. And of course, you can't get away from the fact that there's been controversy around that relationship over the years. But I think people have softened to Camilla, and also it's helped that in the last few months we've seen how, as her husband's been unable to carry out engagements, she's been there and she's stepped up. So yeah, I think we've seen potentially a different side of Camilla. And I think in a way it was reflected in the photograph that they released on Friday when they said that he was going to get back to public duties. It's very much the king looking lovingly at Camilla, and she in many ways is the focus. And I think it shows that for him, behind the scenes, her support could not have been more important.
Daisy, I mean, we can't separate out the public relations from the service, can we? The visibility of the strength of the relationship between the King and the Queen will have been something that the palace, that the House of Windsor will have been keen to emphasise.
Oh, completely. And not just the strength of the relationship, but the fact that Camilla was able and willing to undertake so many additional duties and did it very, very well and was popular doing it. And I was even touched and reminded of that watching them get today, where Rhiannon is, them, the King and the Queen getting back into the state vehicle, and Camilla got into the wrong side, so I tried to get into the wrong side of the car at one point, and she'd just done a sort of small ad hoc walkabout and was shaking hands, looked completely unflustered, walked around to the other side, spoke to another couple of people. And I just thought, here is a woman who actually is very good at what she does now. Looks like she's been doing it her whole life. And of course, she hasn't been doing it her whole life. And is finally getting some sort of public recognition and public affection. And that will mean a lot, not necessarily to her. Of course, it will to her. It will to anybody, but it will mean a lot to the king. He always wanted to put her on a pedestal and was always horrified by the fact that the public had at one point utter disdain for her. That is not the case anymore.
What, Rhiannon, of the others that have stepped up whilst the king has been receiving treatment? My mind goes first, I think I have to say, to Sophie Wessex, pitching up in Ukraine of all places.
Look, Sophie is someone that we wouldn't usually spend much time talking about. I have met her and I've interviewed her. She's a great public speaker. She's actually a real asset to the royal family because she just gets on with the job, really. But I think the fact that she was kind of dispatched to Ukraine is a real pat on the back from the king. And it does also tie into work that she's also done in the past, looking at conflict zones and especially sexual violence in conflict as well.
I think it's very interesting they're talking about Sophie going to Ukraine and discussing this issue that we know she holds very close to her heart of sexual violence against women, particularly in war zones. It was unthinkable a few generations ago that a senior member of the royal family would be championing that kind of issue because it's controversial. Just in the same way that we've seen Camilla talking about domestic violence over the last few years. Again, something like that would have been unthinkable before her. And probably the first royals to really break some of those taboos about which areas are considered okay for senior royals to talk about. And that's, again, how we can measure how this family is modernising, the issues that they choose to discuss. Back in the day, it would have all been, ballet and literature and cutting ribbons, and really nothing more controversial than that.
Rhiannon, Daisy, let's take a breath. After the break, we'll continue to discuss the future of the family as they begin to put this chapter behind them. Back soon. Welcome back to The Daily. Sky's royal correspondent, Rhiannon Mills, and NBC's royal commentator, Daisy McAndrew, still with us. Look guys, I think it is fair to say that the manner in which Charles, Catherine have handled these cancer diagnoses has changed the way the family will behave in public forever. But in terms of just how grim a period this has been, I mean, I have heard some people describing this as, one of the darkest moments for the monarchy. Is that perhaps slightly over-egged? Just a little bit? I mean, I think of Annus Horribilis and the death of Diana and the low dudgeon in which the royal family was held at that particular time as perhaps a more traumatic moment for them.
My thinking is that this is absolutely a family in crisis. Any family that had a young mother and a grandfather, the patriarch, both undergoing cancer treatment at the same time, of course, would be a family in crisis and a family spreading itself very, very thin. Is this a monarchy in crisis? I would say no, because the public aren't blaming Catherine or Charles for the fact they've got cancer, and I think are quite appreciative.
Rhiannon, I mean, is this a historic low for the Windsors, do you think?
No, and there have been far worse moments that you and I have spoken about, Neil, when we look at the scandal around Prince Andrew, when we look at Harry and Meghan deciding to leave, when we look at the racism claims that were thrown at the royal family. Those were really low points, and those were moments where I had some more big questions about the messaging and what was coming from the palace. With this, there is no doubt that it has been difficult for the palace to know how to handle it, especially around the Princess of Wales. What I actually think is it's been a positive for the king. I think when you speak to those who know him really well, they'll often talk about his warmth, his kindness, his sense of humour, his genuine interest in people and wanting to make a difference. And while he has been stopped from going out and doing the walkabouts that he loves so much, what he has managed to do is play this really important public health messaging role. And also I think we've seen a more human side to him.
And yet, I suppose the other side to the positivity that surrounds a person in a public-facing role such as monarch talking openly about their cancer diagnosis is that it does invite speculation about his health, about the preparedness of the royal family for yet another transition at the top, and indeed about the longevity of the House of Windsor as an institution. Daisy.
Yes, absolutely. And again, I hate to keep harking on about the old days, but one of the main reasons why monarchs never disclosed what was going on in their private health is because it was very dangerous to do that. If a neighbouring country knew that the monarch was poorly, they'd be planning an invasion or a war pretty soon. They'd be plotting a coup or something else. So that's the historic reason why we were always told that the monarch was as fit as a fiddle and would be on the throne for years and years, because it was to do with national security. Now, of course, I'm talking about a long time ago, but those feelings that the monarch has to be infallible, has to be stronger than everybody else, has to be leading from the front, they are stuck in history, but people do cling on to that feeling that that's why certainly his predecessors didn't feel comfortable showing any weakness. So we are seeing a different side, and society is ready for that side. We are ready, because in the past, of course, we literally used to think that monarchs were put on the earth by God. As recently as the 1950s, there was a poll that said 36% of the public believed the Queen was chosen by God, was divine. That shows us how much we've moved just in since the mid-50s. And the fact that as the King is able and willing to share some fallibility, some weakness, some vulnerability, I think will endear him certainly to the younger generation, particularly, within which there is a problem with popularity with the royals.
Rhiannon, what is your view about the fact that this institution has been changed by this affair and that there will be speculation that will continue as a result of his candour?
It's always the really difficult balancing act now, I think, because they've sort of opened the door a little bit, haven't they? They've kind of opened the curtain a bit to tell us what's going on, and inevitably, if they don't keep sharing information, that void is going to be filled. On Friday, they've said that, yes, the King is now back to public duties, but they're being really cautious about it. They're saying, look, we're not out of the woods entirely. He is still undergoing treatment. The King himself saying, look, today I'm going to go and have more treatment this afternoon. So he's not now all of a sudden saying, yep, I'm back, I'm fighting fit, this is all going to be fine. And it is the difficult part of our job. Like we saw it with Queen Elizabeth II, we saw it with the Duke of Edinburgh as they got older. There are these constant kind of rumours that kind of start to spiral, and there'll be some little thing said on social media and then it gets completely out of control. It's about keeping him visible because of reassurance. They know that's important, but I think they are being as open and honest as they possibly can. But how does that stop the speculation? It's really difficult. But we've been here before, and we'll go through it again. No doubt.
Certainly will. Rhiannon? Daisy, lovely to see you both. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Thanks.
That the King's treatment is proceeding sufficiently well to permit a return to public duties will be welcomed. So too his candour as to his treatment. A cancer diagnosis can humble anyone, king or commoner. And for all that his family stepped in and stepped up when he needed them, we should expect the King to be a lot more visible in the coming weeks and months. For this is an institution that must be seen if it is to persist. That's your lot for this edition of The Daily. We'll see you again soon.